Good evening, my beautiful wife, and our lovely listeners. I'm hoping that you will dance with me this evening as we journey through this groovy episode. Because as we all know, we'll be dead by dawn. That's right, this is Open Mic Night of the Living Dead, and we're talking about Evil Dead 2, and I hope you'll join us. The creature's creeping right behind you. I hope you finally find a little slice of peace and light. 'Cause it comes crashing down tonight. Welcome to the open mic. When we call your name, you'll die. But there's no need to dread. This is the open mic night of the living dead.
I don't think the cat liked the way you said join us.
Well, that's her problem.
She doesn't want to, apparently.
Yeah, she's gonna start. Well,
All right, so we're here for Evil Dead 2.
I'm John.
I'm Rachel.
We're a married couple.
Sure are.
I met Rachel in a cabin when I was possessed by a demon.
Yep.
Still possessed by the demon, but she's helped guide me through life these past 12 years.
Sometimes, having a demon around has its advantages.
That's right. I'm good at cooking fried eggs.
I mean, you are.
That's a demon thing.
It's a demon thing. I didn't know. Gosh, every day I learn new things about you, babe.
Well, this is Evil Dead 2, and this is our deep dive.
Yeah, it is. It's been a while since we've had one of these.
I know, I'm like disorientated.
I am a bit disorientated as well.
But because if this is your first time joining us, welcome. And if not, you all know that these deep dive episodes include lots of spoilers. We're covering everything. So turn back now, watch the movie if you haven't yet, or if you'd like to join us, even though you haven't watched the movie, that's awesome too. And at the end of this episode, like we do at every deep dive, Rachel and I will be premiering a new original song based on this film for one another. Is that a good recap?
Yeah, that works. And for them too. Like, not just for one another.
Well, no, I asked that they
turn it off.
Yeah, plug their ears for that
When we get
part.
to that point, just do like Rachel does when she's watching a horror, like haunting movie, and just cover my ears, cover my eyes. Technically still watching.
This is all very private. That's why we're putting it on all the public places.
100%. Yep, that's the way to do it these days.
Is there any content warning for this?
Content warning. There's like kind of implied sexual assault, and I think we'll probably talk about in the first, there's some that was kind of there.
With the vines?
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
I know I don't know about that, but I'm just saying, but I plan to talk about the first movie, which does have definitely a sexual assault. So there will be a little bit of discussion of that, non-consensual activities, but not a ton. That's the only thing, though, other than it's just, yeah.
It's gory, a movie,
Yep.
but by today's standards, not that gory.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is like comic book gore, so... Do you remember the first time you ever watched this film?
I do not. I know that it was late high school, early college, because I know I had a VHS. I may still have a VHS somewhere in this house. There's a few boxes in the basement I haven't been through in probably 15 or 20 years, but I liked all three of these movies quite a bit. And actually, my first cat that I got as an adult was named Ash, for Ash and the Evil Dead. And so I definitely watched it back then, but probably, so yeah, that would have been like 1998, 1999.
And have you watched it a lot since then?
I have not. I think I have relied on my memory of that late teens, early 20s viewing when thinking about how I felt about this movie.
I'm pretty sure we also watched it in our apartment at some point, which would predate our record keeping.
Yes.
Either we watched it or I watched it. But I thought I watched it with you, but I don't know. I don't know. Well, I can tell you that I believe, if my memory serves correctly, which it does not always, I believed I saw this in late high school or early college. It was introduced to me by an ex who I was dating at the time, and she was really into it. And this is the first in the original trilogy that I saw.
Huh.
So, and it was kind of explained to me that, it didn't really matter.
Which is true.
And I kind of remember being a little disoriented by the film. I didn't love the film. And I figured, and I just didn't get it at the time. And I think I felt similarly the last time that we watched it, or I watched it a few years ago, whether I watched it with you or not. And I really want to love this movie because I know it is so beloved by so many people. But the reality is that this time around, while I feel like I get it a lot more, it still just doesn't jive with me completely.
Yeah.
I appreciate so many things about that, about the filmmaking, and we'll get into all of that.
Yeah, let's talk about that when we talk about our ratings, because I have some thoughts on that as well. But yeah, tell us about what happened when this film came out.
Do you have a summary?
Oh, I do. I'll do that first. The summary is, I just had it and my battery's dying. Okay. Ash returns to a remote cabin with his girlfriend for a weekend getaway. Or Ash goes to a remote cabin with his girlfriend for a weekend getaway, only to awaken flesh-possessing demons that force him to fight for survival through the night. He loses his hand, his sanity, and nearly everything else before a group of strangers arrives and the real chaos begins.
Sounds like it.
Sounds like it. And yeah, that opening line, we'll talk about it.
I would just say that Ash remains at the cabin.
That is one of the readings, whether you look at it the way Sam Raimi looks at it or the way Bruce Campbell looks at it. And we'll get into that.
Well, this movie, the full true title is Evil Dead 2, but it's frequently advertised or known as Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn. It was released on March 13th of 1987 with a runtime of approximately 84 minutes. It's a quick in and out, this movie. The production company was Renaissance Pictures and was distributed by Sam Raimi's created Rosebud Releasing Corporation. Directed by Sam Raimi, written by Sam Raimi and Scott Spiegel, produced by Robert Tappert. So those are all kind of some of the original Michigan gang.
Yes, indeed.
But this time around, they are funded by one of the big dogs. It was executive produced by Dino De Laurentiis.
Yeah.
I watch his cooking shows all the time. He's kind of a smoke show.
Yeah, not a lie.
No, but I'm not. Have we done a Dino movie yet?
Other than, I mean, as a director, you mean? Or just as a producer?
Producer.
Maximum Overdrive
But
was produced by him.
have we covered one of his movies?
Oh, have we covered one? I thought you said, have we seen one? No, I don't think we have covered one of his movies.
Have you seen Maximum Overdrive?
I saw it years ago.
Yeah.
And then we watched it together.
Did you watch it with me when I watched it?
I swear we watched it.
All right. We'll have to compare notes on that.
Will do.
But obviously, he's a big name in the production world for movies across the genres. But it's interesting to see him here. And I'll talk about how he got involved with this a bit more in the production section. But
cool.
The budget for this film, there's, different reports. It sounds like the most solid number is 3.5 to 3.6 million for the budget here that was used, which is roughly 10 times the budget of the original film.
Crazy. And
the commonly reported domestic theatrical gross is approximately 5.9 million. And so by today's numbers, the budget would have been around 10.3 million, the box office about 17.4 million. So the initial theatrical performance was respectable, but not like ginormous.
Yeah.
Like, people weren't necessarily waiting around in lines around the corner waiting to get in. But over the years, its reputation expanded greatly, largely through VHS, cable screenings, repertory screenings at theaters, horror conventions, critical reassessment, and then sort of the long-term growth of the franchise. Like From a couple of things that I read, it sounded like that because of Army of Darkness's success and fandom, that a lot of people like really kind of started gravitating more to Evil Dead 2 as well.
Yeah, and I remember watching Army of Darkness in high school when I would stay home from school. It would be on maybe Comedy Central because we didn't have any movie channels at my house. But I remember being excited when Army of Darkness was on. So if you are not as old as us, once upon a time, you had to watch whatever was on TV at the time. There was no on demand. There was no streaming. It was just what happens to be on that channel that you like. And so I watched parts of Army of Darkness many, many times. I don't think Evil Dead 2 got the same kind of play. Army of Darkness was on Comedy Central, pretty sure. 80% sureness.
It actually sounds familiar to me.
Cool.
I think I would have often skipped right by that for some music videos or something.
Yeah, not me. I was all about the stories.
Not a huge period piece guy, so the castles and the guys in the armor.
Like, it's like the least historically accurate medieval movie, and you still were disinterested.
Disinterested. This guy was disinterested. Interesting, on the rating, it was released without an MPAA rating in the United States because the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group and Sam Raimi could not agree on cuts that would preserve the film while obtaining an R rating. So it was never formally submitted to the ratings board, but those involved expected that it would receive an X the way that it stands today. And some of them estimated that if they made the cuts that they thought they would need to get an R rating, that the movie would end up being like 62 minutes. I don't know if that's true, but you know.
That's crazy considering some of the other films in this subgenre that have come out that have been pretty wild as well.
Well, it was 1987, and that was
it's one of the first ones, I think. I'll talk about that later too, but
this was the time like when the sort of the second half of the 80s and the early 90s.
It was like way more censorship, right?
Right, like the Friday the 13th movies and all of those slasher movies were way less violent than some of the earlier entries into the franchises. Even those were fairly tame too.
Right. Like, so I like mid 80s, right? I'm thinking about Silent Night, Deadly Night right now with the scenes that are taken out that are all of the killings.
No, that was earlier. So that's why that one's could be more violent and still get an R rating.
Oh, interesting. Well, but many of the kill scenes were out of that movie in the original airing of it though.
They were shortened, yes. Like frames were cut out and stuff like that. For
most
of
yeah.
them. But like by comparison, like I don't think Silent Night, Deadly Night could have been released in 1987, even with those cuts.
Gotcha.
Because at that point, the MPAA had like cracked down on violence. I think it probably had to do with like all the satanic panic and everything that was going on in Congress with not censorship, but people trying to figure out ratings that carried over into music and everything else.
Right.
But in terms of what I found for critical reception, it was fairly well received. Roger Ebert, Rachel's guy from the Chicago Sun-Times, gave it 3 out of 4 stars. He called it a comedy disguised as a blood-soaked shockerama.
Not inaccurate.
No, and I was saying to Rachel after we watch it, like if I could just picture it, like get my head wrapped around the fact that it's a comedy, then I might be able to enjoy it more somehow. But because of all the horror elements, I don't know. We'll get to that in a minute. Ebert also said that level 1 viewers will say it's in bad taste. Level 2 folks like myself will perceive that it is about bad taste. And he said the grubby, low-budget intensity of the film gives it a lovable quality. Karen James at the New York Times called it genuine, if bizarre, proof of Sam Raimi's talent and developing skill. Its ideal audience would be full of Three Stooges fans with streaks of grotesque humor. It is definitely not for the squeamish. Kevin Thomas at the LA Times said that it never lets up, that it's a very funny movie, and as a filmmaker, Raimi is a dynamo. He called it a terrific trip. And Dave Kehr, K-E-H-R, at Chicago Tribune, right across the way from Ebert, they probably, I imagine them have windows that face each other across the city. And just from time to time, they
Shake their fists at one
shake
another.
their fists at one another. But this guy called it consistently lively. That's fair. A ghoulish splatter comedy. The kind of shock that lies between a laugh and a scream. And then lastly, I'll go with Variety, called it more an absurdist comedy than a horror film, a flashy, good-natured display of special effects, so extreme they can only be taken for laughs. So
I agree with Ebert for once.
Rachel and Ebert, why don't you give me the ratings then?
Sure. So it has grown steadily since then from being kind of split to just having a really solid rating. It's gotten 88% critics and 89% on Rotten Tomatoes for audience, which is wild. 7.8 on IMDb, about a 4 on Letterboxd. My personal rating, 3.5, up from a 3, which I thought might happen once I started doing research. My original impulse when we watched this the other day was to give it a 3, which for me is either like it's a fine movie, but it didn't connect. Like the craft is there. What is my 3? Hold on. The craft is real. I didn't connect, or it connected, but craft is lacking. Probably wouldn't watch again. Fine. So not like a great score for me. And a 3.5 is really enjoyed, solid film, would recommend. And I think, or well crafted. And I think that this is well crafted enough that even though I don't love it right now where I am in my horror journey, which is kind of sad and makes me feel old, I still think that its place in the genre is high enough to bump it up to a 3.5. What was your personal rating out of 10, which is what your scale is?
Well, the other day after we watched it, I initially gave it a 6.5. I did see that I had previously given it a 7 on IMDb myself, like in my account.
Mm-hmm.
But you can only give whole numbers in that, so it definitely leans that way. And I think I'm going to make it a 7 in my personal ratings.
Yes, I think that the way this lands now in our 40s lands way different than it did in our young adulthood. And I think it also might have something to do with the way, like our teenager, for example, experiences horror films. She's in a very different spot with what appeals to her and what speaks to her. And in the same way that we've looked at some of the older movies like Psycho and Rosemary's Baby and have come to love them in a way that I certainly did not when I first saw them in my 20s, I think this is the reverse of that. And it really makes me sad that I'm still pretty fucking whimsical. I'm not quite as into the slapsticky, chaotic, never-endingness of this as I would, but I thought it was genius when I was 20.
It's interesting where my rating landed because generally, and there's no rule to it, but I've just noticed over time that my ratings are like 0.5 to like a full point above sort of the IMDb rating in general. There's certainly exceptions, and this is one of them because at a 6.5 to 7, you said that it was like a 7.8. I thought I had seen that it was a 7.6 on IMDb, but either way, usually I'd come out at an 8 or even an 8.5 on a movie that's rated that on IMDb.
100%, yeah.
And so I'm coming in under the average. So interesting, but we also have our joint podcast Open Mic Night of the Living Dead rating scale. 1, total trash, don't even bother seeing it. 2, covers everything from, hey, at least it was bad enough. It was bad, but I still liked it. Good to great. It's like the biggest range are the 2s. And then 3 this is a seminal work in the world of horror. It is a must-see before you die bucket list movie. Where do you think we put this?
Solid 2.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Definitely doesn't rise to a 3, but yeah, watch it for sure. But it might be just up your alley. It certainly is for a lot of people out there.
And please, after you've listened to this episode, feel free to let us know in the comments wherever you're listening or on our social media or something. Let us know if this is like a 10 for you. Let us know what you think we're missing, because I understand it's well loved and remembered, and so I want to love every movie, honestly. So before we move forward, let me tell you some of the other movies that you could have seen in 1987. 1987 was an exceptional horror year. I feel like I say that frequently. The 80s were pretty awesome for horror movies. In fact, if I was like of job working age in the 80s, I might have had to take the decade off just to watch movies the whole time, I've decided. But by 1987, we had a lot of important trends going on. Practical creature effects, horror comedy, body horror. You had like some reinvented vampires kicking around, fantasy horror, and increasingly elaborate sequels. And by this time, the slasher trend that was really going strong in the first half of the 80s, I think, was dwindling a little bit. But check out these horror and horror-adjacent films you could have seen. You could have seen A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, Hellraiser, The Lost Boys, Near Dark. You have not seen Near Dark yet, largely because it's rarely streaming and it is hard to find physical copy to buy that's like not a ridiculous price. I love Near Dark. Another movie I also love that came out in 1987 was John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness, The Gate, The Monster Squad, Dario Argento's Opera, which I still have not watched yet, but it's at the top of my list. That movie Stage Fright that we watched, remember that?
I do remember that. I liked that movie.
It was kind of almost Jollo-y in a way. A movie called Dolls that you haven't seen yet, but is often on our personal wheel.
One of my students just recommended that movie to me last week because they know I like horror movies. She was like, "Did you see Dolls?" I said, "No, but I think I should."
While I'm doing it, will you check to see who directed it? It's somebody that we like.
Yeah. And I didn't have my phone with me, so I couldn't look it up when she mentioned it. But it's Stuart Gordon.
Right.
That's why. I looked it up afterwards.
Reanimator and From Beyond.
This was his movie right after Reanimator, right? Because Reanimator was like 85, maybe? Anyway.
Also, The Stepfather.
Okay.
Bad Taste.
Amazing. Peter Jackson.
Slumber Party Massacre 2.
Fun.
And one more that you haven't seen yet that I've watched that's on our wheel is Street Trash.
Okay.
But aside from horror, I think I would be doing an injustice to the year of 1987 if I didn't talk about some of the other movies that came out, like RoboCop, The Princess Bride, Full Metal Jacket, Fatal Attraction, Raising Arizona, The Untouchables, Predator, Lethal Weapon, Dirty Dancing, Wall Street, Plane, Trains, and Automobiles, among others. Like, I just cut some out.
Okay, so yeah, I see what you mean about 1987.
Yeah, ridiculous. I'm taking 1987 off. I'll be at the movie theater. Luckily, I can make a living wage doing
anything.
Yeah.
Working at Burger King. Or
so full of Whoppers at the movies. Watching RoboCop. All right. That's pretty much it for distribution and everything. We've done our ratings. Should we make a movie?
Let's make a movie.
Let's make a movie. We'll make sure that it's spooky. I sure hope that it's groovy. Let's make a movie.
All right, here we are. Let's make a movie. So this is a sequel. This is our second sequel episode. And so if you haven't listened to our Evil Dead episode yet, or if you did listen to it, either way, I think you should go back, check it out. I'm not going to go into as much detail about some of the key personnel in this because we've covered it once. So, I'm going to kind of use the time for some other things. But obviously, Sam Raimi returns as the director and co-writer, the captain of this ship. And sort of one of the things I was looking at was sort of what changed between the first and second films. He and Bruce Campbell and I think the team made a movie called Crime Wave, which I haven't seen. That came out, I think, in 1985. And during that process, they dealt with like a lot of substantial studio interference. So very different experience from when they had free reign over Evil Dead. But, after all of this, they gained access to a much larger budget and developed greater technical confidence and became, and Raimi specifically wanted to put comedy more in the forefront, at least for this film. What really stayed the same between the two movies from Raimi's point of view was like sort of the aggressive point of view camera work, the practical gore effects, and the cabin as a trapped environment. You also had the demonic possession, the bodily violation, and an aggressively physical directing style in a sense. The thing that really changed, obviously, there's a lot more overt slapstick comedy, faster pacing by far, more expressive lighting. You had like real purpose-built sets on this movie. I think one of the funnest parts of the original Evil Dead was talking about not the horrors of the film, but the horrors of making the film. That
Production was crazy on that movie.
Like hiking through the mud to this little cabin that was falling apart. That didn't happen this time. And then they had more sophisticated effects and stronger fantasy elements. And they were less concerned, I would say, with like realism in this film. Not that the original is like completely grounded in realism, but this movie is a lot more fantastical. I don't know if you came across this, but when they were originally talking about doing a sequel to Evil Dead, it really sounds like Army of Darkness is the sequel that they wanted to make, or at least that Raimi wanted to make.
I think that parts of it, yes, that it was like having a medieval hero was like always the goal, and that I think they didn't want to do as much back at the cabin. I think they just wanted to do Army of Darkness, but because I think it was De Laurentiis who was like, no, do this instead.
Yeah, De Laurentiis wanted something more recognizably connected to the original, while Raimi's early sequel idea involves sending Ash back to medieval times. Now, obviously, Raimi retained the medieval concept for sort of the denouement of this film. And I really kind of view this film, I'm not like the hugest James Bond fan, but I do like some James Bond movies. To me, this is like the Quantum of Solace.
I don't know the movies well enough to understand that parallel.
It's like Quantum of Solace to me works as like a transition film.
Gotcha.
And that seems like what this film sort of was designed after sort of De Laurentiis said they got to keep it at the cabin. It seems, and I could be completely wrong, but like Raimi kind of was like, well, I want to get to that medieval movie that I want to make. I got to make De Laurentiis happy. So I'm just going to make this kind of as a transition from the cabin to Army of Darkness.
Some of what I read, and I'm not sure how accurate this is, implied kind of that the reason he went so over the top was because he was forced to make this movie. He was like, you want a funny movie? You want a funny slapstick movie? Okay, I got you. So like leaned hard, like maybe he didn't actually want to lean that hard into it, but because he was forced to make it again was like, fine, great. I'm going to do the best that I can. I didn't get that impression from everything that I read, and there's a lot out there. Please check the show notes. I put all the fun articles that we looked at in there. But I think that's a really interesting observation. You remember when we did Fright Night last year, we covered Fright Night, and I remember listening to a Tom Holland interview where he talked about one of the reasons Fright Night was so great was because there was no studio interference at all. Like they got to make exactly the movie they wanted to make. And I'm wondering if now in our movie watching career and having watched Evil Dead and doing a deep dive on it last year, if maybe one of the reasons this doesn't ring as true for us anymore is because Evil Dead feels more like the movie that Raimi wanted to make originally, even with all the restrictions and the restraints. And this one does feel just a little excessive and manic. And I don't know. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, I don't entirely know. I mean, I know that they loved the Three Stooges and they love that kind of comedy and always wanted to incorporate that.
Yes. And I think that I don't think they didn't want to put the comedy in. I think he did it because he wanted. But if he had been able to make the movie he wanted to make without studio interference and leading, but also didn't Crime Wave like flop horribly? Like, so his last movie was really bad, which meant he was kind of beholden to De Laurentiis for help letting him even make another movie, right? Like, and now of course he's super uber triple gajillion famous and has done, then he did Spider-Man and all the other things that he's done at this point.
Well, the only impression that I got, though, was the only real studio interference for this film was that. Like,
yes,
I wanted it to be more of a cabin movie. It didn't seem to me like once they had fleshed out the idea.
Right. But that does seem like a pretty big imposition to have if you had a different idea, right? Like the setting of the movie is a pretty big one.
And Army of Darkness is pretty slapsticky and
100%.
So.
And I still think I like Army of Darkness more than this one. I like the bookends of the original trilogy, I think.
Well, we'll find out
We'll get
because I fell asleep the last time we watched it, which I don't do that.
Not often.
Only during Army of Darkness and sometimes during movies with the kids.
That's fair. That's fair. Who else made this movie?
Well, we didn't get really to talk about him during the Evil Dead episode, but we talked about him plenty during the Intruder episode, and that's Scott Spiegel. Mm-hmm. And he really is part of the original sort of Michigan crew. And his only real role, if my research is correct, in the original Evil Dead was he played one of the fake Shemps. He acted in it, but he wasn't really one of the filmmakers or creators for that project.
Right, I think you're right.
But they'd worked together on lots of stuff. Like before that, I think they made a lot of amateur films together. And later on, all of these guys, I don't know if it would have been exactly at this time, but I think Sam Raimi, Campbell, maybe Tappert, the producer, and Scott Spiegel lived with like the Coen brothers and Frances McDormand.
Spiegel and Raimi did, I know for sure. I don't know if Campbell did and Tappert, but they were all hanging out together in LA. But
Yeah.
I do know that Raimi and Spiegel were living with the Coen brothers and Frances McDormand and Holly Hunter.
Because I think she was supposed to be in this too. But
Oh, funny.
so one of his major contributions, Scott Spiegel I'm talking about now, were his comic instincts. His influence is especially visible in sort of like the possessed hand sequence and some of the more rapid visual jokes and object-based comedy. Like he had a movie short, like a 6-minute film called Attack of the Helping Hand. Did you see this?
No.
And like the movie art for it, the poster art, and it was inspired by the Hamburger Helper glove hand.
I saw something about that, the Hamburger Helper hand. I didn't realize there was a short film in between.
Yeah, it was called Attack of the Helping Hand. And basically, the Evil Dead 2 uses that joke when it's, when Ash chops off his own hand and it's been attacking him and then it continues attacking lots of people.
Great.
So that was really kind of Scott Spiegel's influence. And otherwise, I think that if you listen to the Intruder episode, you'll get plenty more of information about him there in a film that I enjoy more. That's right.
I think so too.
Come at me. I can much better imagine myself watching Intruder again in the next couple of years than I can Evil Dead 2. But
Agreed.
who knows? Maybe we'll end up at a con or something and they're playing it or something and we'll get to watch it. And maybe that experience will be different.
Maybe.
They also had, during development, the screenplay went through substantially different concepts. One abandoned version reportedly included escaped convicts holding Ash in the cabin while searching for buried treasure.
Nice.
Which is kind of cool. And before I let you talk about the cast, the last person I'm just going to mention quickly is Robert Tappert. Him and Roger Ebert should get together with all their teas to throw me off.
Ours and their teas together.
We'll have a tea party.
Shut the fuck.
He was the returning producer again, and he served as sort of the central production organizer, but his responsibility changed quite a bit. When this film came along, obviously a 10 times larger budget than the original that he was managing under sort of the guise of the guidance of De Laurentiis and his company. But at this point, they had professional crews they were working with, extensive makeup and mechanical effects, large interior sets. They had the North Carolina location work, and then later on, Michigan reshoots and effects work. Like, he had a much bigger project to manage at this point compared to the very sort of ragtag friends making a movie like they did for the first one. So, but it seems like he pulled it off. What can you tell me about the cast?
Well, we've talked about a lot of them before. So if you would like even more information on these folks, you can get that. in our Evil Dead episode and our Intruder episode to some extent. Bruce Campbell plays Ash Williams. Of course, Bruce, part of the original Michigan group. We've got all sorts of stuff. I don't know exactly what we've talked about with him before.
It doesn't matter if you repeat something.
Also true. So yes, Bruce Campbell met Sam Raimi in high school drama class, and they bonded over Three Stooges slapstick and B-horror, which explains a lot of this movie. He attended Western Michigan University, and then they left to produce acting. The original star and co-producer of the original Evil Dead, and he was supposed to lead in Crime Wave, but the studio wanted a more Hollywood name, and so he had the supporting role of Ronaldo the Heel. He also has been in things like The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., Jack of All Trades. He was on Hercules and Xena, which was also produced by Rob Tappert, which I went down that rabbit hole while doing some research. And Bruce also wrote the memoir, If Chins Could Kill, which I read when we were dating, the first month we were dating, and I was visiting my sister in Chicago, and she had this book on her bookshelf. I'm sure it belonged to her husband, not her. But I remember reading that book while you and I were exchanging sweet nothing text messages and audio files.
That would have been when she lived in Wisconsin.
That's when she lived in Wisconsin.
Not Chicago.
Oh, right. I said Chicago because I'm so used to it. But yes, she was in Wisconsin, and I went out there. And so Bruce Campbell is, for me, very tied to the beginning of our relationship just because I read his life story and when we were first dating. Well, I'm not sure if I mentioned that in the last episode.
And it was around this time, too, that he would have done Maniac Cop, which is more kind of in this world.
And then he did this other movie that I didn't write down, and my phone's really close to dying. It's a movie, I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. It's like a post-apocalyptic world, and they live underground. And I caught it on television at some point in the 2000s. I mean, he's been in so many movies. I'm just kind of bringing up the ones. And of course, this is not going to be one that was super famous. I can't remember the name of it right now. It's not Mind Warp. It's like some really weird post-apocalyptic cool thing. But he's been in a bunch of cool stuff. Oh, he was also in Burn Notice, which I watched that whole series at one point, and I really liked him in that. Bottom line, we really like him in everything that he's in, and he's just great. And he's also just a huge part of the horror community. He's kind of universally adored, currently is fighting cancer, and is sharing some of that on social media, so I know I get a lot of updates from him. But yeah, Bruce Campbell, and this movie is what turned him into the king we all know and love, I think, which is part of the love for this movie is Bruce Campbell as Ash. So, but there's other people in this movie too, though you wouldn't know it necessarily. Sarah Berry plays Annie Noby. Her agent was a friend of Raimi's. She was originally recommended for the role of Bobby Joe because she was raised in the South, but she pushed for a shot at Annie after her audition and won the part. She really only did one other major screen movie. She did Chud 2, Bud the Chud, in 1989.
Sweet.
But left acting not long after to raise a family and become a clinical psychologist. This is according to Campbell in his book.
Huh.
Dan Hicks, who I was like, is that Scott Spiegel? It's not Scott Spiegel. It's Dan Hicks, who was Bill Roberts in Intruder.
Oh, my God.
And I can't believe we didn't, because he has like a mustache in Intruder.
And in this, he also had
he had weird teeth.
Yeah.
So I did not place that until I was like, Bill Hicks.
I knew I recognized him.
That sounds so familiar. We spent 2 hours talking about Intruder. And yeah, anyway, he's a frequent collaborator. He's also been in Oz the Great and Powerful. He was also in some movies that sounded really interesting, like Dick Johnson and Tommy Gun versus the Cannibal Cop, based on a true story, which is the full name of a movie. And something called The Blood Hunter and something called Shelfie. So yeah, Dan Hicks does a great job in this movie as Jake, a nice foil.
Isn't Shelfie like when you take a picture of yourself in the mirror and you're like sitting on like the bathroom counter and you're kind of, your butt's like up on the counter? Isn't that a Shelfie?
Are you making that up right now?
No, I don't think so.
Really? That's like a real thing? I hate the future. Bobby Joe, Jake's partner, who he makes horrible choices about. That's the character, though, not the cast. It wasn't Dan Hicks. That was Jake. Bobby Joe is played by Cassie Wesley DePaiva. She was born in Kentucky in 1961. She started out as a country singer, and her film debut was in Evil Dead 2, but then she went on to a long soap opera career. She was on General Hospital for 4 episodes, and then she was on Days of Our Lives for 18 years. And she also did some episodes of Baywatch and Melrose Place. But she did a great job in this, I thought, even though she was a bit of a Barbara, which I guess means the actress did a good job. Denise Bixler plays Linda, who's on screen for the first 7 minutes. She has not had many other roles. And then Richard Domeyer plays Ed Getley, who is Annie's boyfriend. He became a QVC host in 1995. And also did some soap operas and some other film roles, but you could see him, and there's a great still of his crazy deadite face that showed up in a lot of articles. So I think that's kind of funny if you're watching QVC and happen to know that little fact. But John Peaks played Professor Raymond Noby. Lou Hancock played Henrietta Noby. She was on a ton of TV. The one, not the deadite one, the one knitting in the corner. She was on Highway to Heaven, Night Court, Newhart, Dynasty, Doogie Howser, MD, Melrose Place, and Walker, Texas Ranger, among other things. And then, of course, Ted Raimi does make an appearance in this film as the possessed Henrietta, which is a crazy role. And some of the behind-the-scenes pictures of him putting that makeup and costuming on was really intense. But Ted, of course, is part of the crew. Sam's younger brother, born in Detroit. Bruce Campbell used to babysit him, which I hadn't caught in any of the other movies we've talked about them in. He's been in almost every Raimi production. He was also in Candyman.
Yeah.
And been in a bunch of other things. He was a fake Shemp in the original Evil Dead. That was his first role. And then he also plays Henrietta on Ash versus the Evil Dead, the TV show that we haven't talked about much. And he played Ted Hoffman across Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. So that's a pretty small cast, actually.
Yeah.
Which is good, because if they had more people, it would be even more crazy and chaotic.
Well, let me tell you a bit about the production of this movie.
Cool.
I already mentioned a little bit about kind of what happened between The Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, but it does sound like Stephen King's advocacy was kind of crucial to this. And he'd just, speaking of Maximum Overdrive, he was making that film, or he had just made that film with De Laurentiis. As we know from our previous episode on The Evil Dead, King had helped the original gain notice. He'd given it, kind of a positive review or whatever. And that was when he was like on, cooking on all cylinders in many ways. And he later helped bring the proposed sequel to Laurentiis' attention. And it sounds like the financing sort of changed hands a couple of times through there before it landed with De Laurentiis. So it took a little time to get this sequel made. Aside from the Raimi versus Campbell interpretations of the opening, do you know why they decided to do that?
Because of the rights.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the first things that comes up, I think, online. A lot of people have covered this whole rights story.
So you're saying I shouldn't cover it?
No, I'm just saying that if you want to know more about it, I ended up learning tons about it, but I was like, no, it's not my part.
Well, it's fairly simple when you boil it all down. Raimi didn't own the rights that he would need to reuse the footage from the first film. So and this was a time, I don't know. I guess we get it still on your Netflix shows and everything. You get like some episodes kind of give you a recap of what happened last time. That was happening a lot in movies back then, especially, I'm like specifically thinking of the Friday the 13th movies. Some of those movies like padded their runtime with the recaps at some point. So that was kind of a popular thing to do with sequels, and they wanted to have basically a recap. They couldn't show any of the first film, so they therefore recreated a shorter version with new footage. And that's sort of what the first 7 minutes are of this. So from my perspective, and I'm going to let you chime in here with the other thing, this is how I perceive it, is the opening is a stylized recap. And then once the sort of the demon spirit, the unseen force, I guess, kind of runs through the field, then goes through the cabin and smashes into Ash, that is where the sequel starts.
Yeah, and that is how Bruce Campbell has explained how he sees it, that you should see the first 7 as just a recap of the first, and that really the second movie starts once the demon smashes into Ash, and so does a continuation of the first, very much a sequel and not a remake. Although he has called it a requel. There's a very famous interview with him that lots of people have cut and reposted that where he says, yeah, it's not really a remake. It's a sequel. It's a requel. I don't actually, I think it's more of a sequel with a brief recap. So a recap sequel. Sam Raimi, however, has said that everything in Evil Dead 2 is what's going on in Ash's mind because the Deadite has taken over him. And so the whole thing, including the recap, is just Ash remembering things wrong, which makes less sense to me.
Yeah, it sounds like finding meaning in something after the fact,
Yeah,
which is fine to do.
Yeah, I find it very easy to understand this as a sequel when looking at it as the 7 minutes are just a recap and you can kind of fill in the details from the first one. But for years, I've thought it was just a remake. And I think when I was younger and there was no Instagram or TikTok to go on and find these answers, right? The first part of it is so similar. What struck me a lot on this time around is how fast that first part is. 7 minutes, right, of a recap. And so like how I thought it was a remake when I was younger, I don't know. I guess I just didn't understand.
Well, it's certainly
It's
the kind of sequel that repeats a lot of the same beats too as the first movie.
Totally.
Even when the quote sequel starts, which is fine. I think we might cover that in our encore, that concept. But
oh, cool. Yeah, good idea.
But principal photography began in May of 1986 once the ball was rolling and production was set to get started. And filming continued through the summer of 86 and into September. The exterior scenes were filmed first, and later reshoots were completed in a warehouse in Dearborn, Michigan. And then also later on, the stop motion, additional inserts and effects were also completed through the Michigan Production Network. And the reason they ended up in Wadesboro, North Carolina, which is where they shot most of the film. Did I mention? I don't think I even said that they shot in Wadesboro. So they shot most of the film, though, in Wadesboro, including the exteriors and most of the interior. The reason they ended up there was because De Laurentiis had production facilities in Wilmington, North Carolina. But De Laurentiis Entertainment Group wanted to charge Raimi's production for the use of those facilities. So that was part of the reason that they shifted inland to Wadesboro, but also Wadesboro provided the woods, the rural landscape, sort of the inexpensive spaces that were kind of important to the vibe of the film. And it was the cat's snoring. It created enough distance kind of from the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group for the production to kind of operate more independently. I think that they also were kind of afraid that if they were right there in using the De Laurentiis facilities, that they might have a little bit more studio interruption. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, a farmhouse that was used sort of in the color purple became the production office. And then, this is a cool thing, J.R. Faison Junior High School is where they constructed the interior sets inside the school's gymnasium. And the rental cost to use this space was $500 a week. Plus, I guess they had to repair the leaking roof.
Nice.
Sounds like a backwoods kind of deal.
It's a win-win.
The cabin was constructed on 2 levels in the gymnasium. And so the cellar was actually physically beneath the main cabin floor rather than being represented by 2 separate disconnected sets. So different from the first movie, building this set allowed them to have removable walls, hidden rigs, blood mechanisms, sort of a lot of the stuff that they couldn't pull off when they were filming just in the cabin. The cabin exterior and the woods were filmed separately from the school gym interiors, obviously, and then edited together. So, you know, when they walk through the front door of the cabin, you're seeing the exterior from outside of the cabin there in Wadesboro, and then they're walking into the set of the gym. Movie magic.
Amazing.
Did you see what the production motto was for this? The gore the merrier.
Cool.
Just a couple of production anecdotes. Raimi and Campbell have a shorthand that continued on into this film. the cinematographer Peter Deming kind of talked about this, having observed how Raimi and Campbell sort of interact and communicate. And it's like it through a Three Stooges vocabulary. So Raimi could reference a piece of physical comedy from the Three Stooges, and Campbell immediately understood the movement he had to do, the expression that Raimi was looking for, and the timing of the comedy. And so then Deming, his job was to make the camera hit the same comic beat. Did you notice Freddy Krueger's glove?
I didn't.
I meant for us to go back and check before we started recording today, and I completely forgot about it. But Freddy Krueger's glove is hanging in the work shed, apparently.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because it kind of continues this sort of tribute to among the horror movies. So The Hills Have Eyes by Wes Craven displayed a damaged Jaws poster. And then The Evil Dead displayed a torn Hills Have Eyes poster. Then Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street showed The Evil Dead playing on television. So then Evil Dead 2 has Freddy's glove in it. So kind of like an ongoing nodding back and forth.
That's pretty cool.
And the Rosebud releasing logo was created that opens up sort of the movie. This company was created specifically to distribute this unrated film. Raimi designed the company's blossoming rose logo, and there's kind of a buzzing fly heard over when they showed the logo, and that's a buzzing fly from the first Evil Dead. And lastly, they had a rap party talent show when the movie was done filming.
That must have been fun.
One of the notorious performances from this talent show was Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell performing 8 Miles High with Greg Nicotero accompanying them on guitar. But
I don't know what 8 Miles High is.
Well, I'd sing it for you, but then we'd get sued.
Fair.
I also don't know what it is. That being said, that wraps up my production.
Great.
Should we check the vibes?
I think it's time to check the vibes.
Here we go, we're checking the vibes. Sounding good and looking real nice. How'd they make that guy unalive? It's better off without CGI. Listen on point and we're feeling fine. The slow burn is taking its time. Here we go, we're checking the vibes.
All right. This is the section where we talk about all the elements of the filmmaking that create to the vibe, the tone, sort of what you feel at the end of the movie. And, I must say that even though some of the humor is not my favorite in this film, a lot of the horror vibes are pretty on point. I'm going to start with cinematography, as I always do. The cinematographer of this film ended up becoming Peter Deming. He was not the original cinematographer for this movie, but things weren't working out. I had the name of the original cinematographer. I can't find it.
Is it the original one from the... I've got a note here about Raimi and original cinematographer Tim Philo. No, but that's from the first movie, right? That's what I was assuming. Yeah.
But if I come across it, I'll mention him. It doesn't really matter because it became Peter Deming, who was born in 1957 in Beirut, Lebanon, because of his father's work. That's how he ended up there. But he primarily grew up in Wisconsin. Speaking of Wisconsin, he went to University of Wisconsin-Madison and later the American Film Institute. And he didn't begin with a plan to become a cinematographer. He kind of started out after going through school. He did some projection work, film lab work, assistant camera positions, did some camera operating on some educational films. And he described both Evil Dead 2 and then Hollywood Shuffle, which also came out in 1987. I think that was Eddie Murphy movie. As he said that those are the two projects that became his first major breaks. And apparently Raimi found him because Deming had photographed a low-budget independent film in Michigan. But there is only one other small film like before this in his career. Now, his career has been huge, and we've actually talked about him before in the Scream episode because I believe the original cinematographer for Scream got fired with like 2 weeks left on the production. And he was working in the camera department, so he did some of the director of photography work just at the end of Scream. But aside from that, and some of these are kind of out of order, but he did House Party. He was a cinematographer on all these films. House Party, My Cousin Vinny, From Hell, The Cabin in the Woods, Oz the Great and Powerful. He did Austin Powers International Man of Mystery and Goldmember. He worked on a handful of David Lynch projects, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, which I love. And then when Twin Peaks, the TV show came back, he worked on that. He was the cinematographer for Screams 2, 3, and 4. He did Drag Me to Hell with Raimi. And most recently, at least for our audience, he was the cinematographer on The Menu.
Yeah, I saw that. Did you say Cabin in the Woods?
Yep.
Okay, I thought so. I wasn't sure. I didn't know if you said Cabin in the Woods or I was just thinking about a cabin in the woods. But yeah, he's done a lot.
He has emphasized that horror doesn't always need to be visually dark, that fear can come also through the performances, the characters, withholding information, the way you frame the picture, and sort of visual expectation. Which makes sense because I always think of the Scream movies as kind of bright and not as dark and horror-y. So that philosophy fits Evil Dead 2, which often uses bright fluid colors, graphic visibility, broad performances, to say the least, and openly like artificial effects rather than hiding everything in darkness. I really liked the camera work in this movie, and I don't know how much of that is Raimi. I don't know how much of that is Peter Deming, but that is one of the things that I kind of enjoyed, though. Like everything else in this movie, I thought sometimes it was a bit over the top for my taste, but I really liked a lot of the camera work, sort of some of the angles. There's a lot of low angle shots, and just like they kind of professionalized some of the camera work that was done in the first movie, like those unseen forced shots.
Right, the Raimi cam.
Yeah. So Deming really kind of glossed those up a little bit for this bigger budget movie.
And we talked about the Raimi cam last time, right? About the camera on a piece of wood.
Yeah.
Running through the woods.
It's not clear to me whether that's exactly how they did that in this film, but they might have done that, but with a higher quality camera.
Yeah, they used the Samocam rig is what I saw. And so Deming kind of built on the groundwork to like fluff it up from shine it up from Philo's stuff that he and Sam did in the first one.
There's a couple of sequences I was going to talk about real quickly just to highlight some of the cinematography. The first is sort of the possessed hand sequence when it's going for the cleaver.
Yeah.
This had a lot of whip pans, which is when you go like back and forth really quickly between what you're focusing on. In this case, sort of the hand, then the cleaver, then Ash, right? You're kind of going back and it's kind of a battle. The hand is trying to get to the cleaver and Ash is knocked out at that point, but then Ash comes to, and whatever. We'll talk about that in Murder Mayhem. But this visual separation kind of encourages the audience to accept the hand as a second performer, which I like that notion. But again, this is also like really highlights that Three Stooges comedy through the camera work. Then we had Henrietta in the cellar. And this is kind of where the 2-level cabin construction kind of allowed the camera to establish genuine vertical geography. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, from the first film, they shot in the cabin, but the cellar sequences themselves were shot in a different location after the fact.
Yeah, different. They had to dig a cellar for it.
But that was like just to stand.
Just to go in and out of it. But the cellar itself was different. I think you're right.
Yeah. So there are the low angles from the cellar make Henrietta feel trapped but dangerous. Then there's the high angles looking down, emphasizing confinement and the hole in the floor, the risk of approaching Henrietta. And because the cellar physically existed beneath the main set, eye lines of the actors and interactions could feel more coherent than they would have if they had separate sets for those locations. My favorite sequence probably in this film is the chainsaw transformation.
Yeah.
It's really kind of action movie prepping montage, which you can't go wrong with an action movie prepping montage. And it's a montage of Ash constructing his final weapon, attaching the chainsaw to his arm. And it's just a lot of different shots, close-ups of metal, saw components, straps, the severed wrist, the shotgun, Ash's face, just him getting completely ready. And they use a lot of low angles and aggressive close-ups, making Ash suddenly appear larger, more controlled, heroic. So while earlier in the movie, the camera was acting sort of against Ash, almost humiliating him at times through how it was viewing him, here it helps manufacture him as an action figure. Not like a toy action figure, like a figure of action.
Right.
So, there's a lot of other great examples, but those were some that really stood out to me and I thought really exemplified the difference between the cinematography and also kind of the set construction, everything between this film compared to the original.
There was one shot in the kitchen sink that reminded me of Intruder a lot, kind of like a looking up from it, I definitely had some callbacks to that. But yeah, good summary.
In terms of the lighting is a lot more heightened here than in the first. The first one was a lot darker and kind of more gothic, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, that vibes.
So you had much more strong directional sources, creating hard shadows, bright highlights, sort of the deep black spaces, but not in the way that you think of like a darker horror movie. There's a lot more contrast. And real quickly, I'm not going to go into it very far, but I also wanted to give a shout out to the editor in this film, Kay Davis, because a movie like this, editing is key, and I definitely think she did a phenomenal job. She did work in the editorial department on Crime Wave, and she became the credited editor of Evil Dead 2. She doesn't have like a huge bio online. She did a few other movies, none of them that I'm familiar with. But for this film, she had to organize all this high-speed camera movement, the prosthetic inserts, the stop-motion animation, the stunts, the close-ups, the dialogue comedy, the false realities, the physical effects, focusing on specific body parts and objects that were acting as characters. And it's a huge challenge, obviously, to begin with, but also determining whether something is a scare or a joke, or a scare turning into a joke, depends heavily on the editing. And I think that they achieved what they were going for, which means she did a great job. She did exactly what she signed up for, or what they signed her up for, but that could not have been an easy task.
Yeah, no, great work there.
All right. Well, that's what I'm going to do on cinematography and editing. What can you tell me about the special effects?
Oh, there's so much stuff, but I'll try to get through it relatively efficiently. Tom Sullivan did the stop motion animation for this film. He returned from the original where he did also a lot of the makeup, but he really focused on the stop motion, the props, and the animated Book of the Dead prologue, which is pretty fantastic. And he brought on Mark Sjostrom as the makeup effects supervisor. He is an interesting guy, got interested in makeup after seeing Bride of Frankenstein as a kid, and then he was mentored by Evelyn Karloff, Boris Karloff's widow. Wow. So yeah, some real Hollywood royalty here. And he was brought on because Tom Sullivan felt that the sequel was too big for him to handle solo, which, yeah. He has had an incredible career. He's got over 80 TV and film makeup credits, including Buffy the Vampire Slayer instead of the other Buffy, X-Files, Charmed, Star Trek Voyager, Phantasm 2 and 3, Nightmare on Elm Street 1 through 3, which is when you mentioned Freddy's Glove, that makes sense. Prince of Darkness, From Beyond, Mutilator, which is a really cool movie, Videodrome, and The Slumber Party Massacre. So he did, and a lot of these, I guess, he was uncredited on IMDb, so I'm curious about that. I don't know how those all end up on his resume while being uncredited, but obviously the makeup in this movie, huge deal, right? KBN Effects also was on set. Greg Nicotero, Robert Kurtzman, and Howard Berger, they were the makeup effects crew. Nicotero has called Evil Dead 2 the proving ground for K&B. And remember that Intruder was their first film where they were like lead effects, which was just a couple years after this. So kind of cool that they were here on Evil Dead 2. And I think that's why, if I remember correctly, Spiegel invited them to do Intruder, is because he knew them from Evil Dead 2.
And this is before they were K&B.
Yes, they had not created K&B yet. I believe Intruder was their first film as K&B. I might be off. They've done hundreds of movies, so... And then Doug Beswick, who was recommended by Showstrom, the makeup effects supervisor, animated the Dancing Linda sequence frame by frame. He used a miniature cabin set built to match live action footage. So again, back in 1987, nowadays, very different story to make this kind of a scene. But back then, really cool to think about how they made it. Choreographer Ken Warner designed the dance routine, and it was shot live action on 35 millimeter, although without the decapitation, the story said. Raimi cut the footage into a sequence, and then Beswick matched his stop-motion animation to it frame by frame. So a lot of really intense work to make that one little scene. Beswick also crafted the fully possessed rotten apple head that the Henrietta creature uses in the final fight, and that was based on a K&B built puppet head. There was all sorts of props kind of borrowed or inspired by other movies in that way. So like the flying deadite was designed in the style of harpies from Jason and the Argonauts, which I haven't seen, but seemed interesting, kind of all the deep connections in this movie to other ones. The film's soft sclera contact lenses, which is what they use for the eye effects, were way better than the original hard glass lenses. Nicotero has described the new ones were still uncomfortable, but it was like putting a piece of Tupperware under your eyelid instead of glass. And I'm just thinking about Fright Night, which came out in 1985, and they had like really a lot of pain from those glass ones. Ugh, no thanks. So there's a prop chainsaw was rigged to wear over Campbell's real hand, obviously, for the final images. The fake blood, this was interesting because I had written a note while we were watching about there's so many liquids, green and black and red, like... I literally so many liquids. Fake blood was a mix of Caro syrup, non-dairy creamer, and food coloring. And this I have not confirmed absolutely, but I like it anyway, so maybe it's true. But producers worried that the sheer volume of blood would trigger the X rating. So again, concerns about its reception and its rating affecting production. So the crew was told to use different colors like black, green, red, and yellow on the theory that non-red blood would read as less objectionable to the ratings board, which I thought was really interesting. And who knows? And then they didn't even get a rating, so...
They did that, and then they had the final product. They were like, we still can't.
Yeah, exactly. We should have just done it all red. I mean, but of course, that's a piece of what makes it what it is it's got this crazy colors all over the place.
Yeah.
For the scene where a geyser of blood erupts from the wall onto Ash, Campbell lay flat on his back under a 55-gallon drum of stage blood that was just released to gravity.
Nice.
He later experienced it compared it to waterboarding. And there was a wooden brace built to keep Campbell's head from snapping back during the impact. Dan Hicks, who plays Jake, almost choked to death during his death scene when a misaligned blood hose sprayed straight up and rained directly onto his face. He has estimated, I don't know how he estimated this, the volume at 55 gallons in 3.5 seconds, forced down his throat.
That would be a lot.
And then he did the take again. So, commitment, folks. Some stunts required extra insurance. I don't know if you saw that in your production notes. So like Ash being hurled through the trees on the handheld camera rig required extra insurance, which makes sense. And the possessed hand was based, as you said, like on Scott Spiegel had done a short film, right? But Campbell fully improvised that fight, which is a really cool point. I mean, his ability as a physical comedian, unparalleled, really established him as kind of as who he is, right? As who Bruce Campbell became for all of us.
He's kind of like a prototype for Jim Carrey in a way.
Yeah, I think so. There's not many other big physical comedians I can think of that, and I don't know when Jim Carrey, probably the 90s, right?
Yeah. Probably like 7 or 8 years after this, he had like a bunch of movies come out.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know how much, if Jim Carrey likes horror movies and if he had seen this.
I saw some talk online about people saying they want Jim Carrey to play Freddy Krueger in the new
Ooh.
Nightmare on Elm Street movies, which I can't disagree with that.
That would be
choice,
great.
but-
That would be really good. And then one last piece, which I'm not sure if this is special effects really, but it is kind of interesting. So editor Kay Davis got her hand caught in the projector during a test screening, and she bled onto the print. And everybody laughed except for Raimi, who found the sight of real blood really upsetting. Even though there was 50-gallon fake blood dumps all the time, he could not handle real blood.
Well, that is interesting because, like, I feel that way. Like, I'm not very scared by horror movies in general, but I do love them so much. And it's because there's something in my brain that can separate the fact that it's not real enough that it doesn't matter. So I guess he has that even times two.
Yeah.
Like, there were a couple of things I had on special effects. Did you see on the Henrietta suit for Ted Raimi just how hot it would get?
I didn't. I saw pictures, though, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Apparently the set, because of all the lighting and everything, could get up to 110 degrees on its own. And then he was in this giant polyurethane and foam rubber suit that they sometimes, like, had, like, lentils placed inside it to add more weight and mass to it. And so because of how hot this would get, they would try to film as many of his Henrietta scenes at night, but sweat would collect inside the suit. Greg Nicotero later recalled draining it into cups.
Gross.
And then I guess when Henrietta is spinning around, now that we know, the next time we watch it, I guess you can see the moisture just like flying off of the suit.
Enough.
And then on the chainsaw hand construction, Verna Hyde modified a real chainsaw, but the gasoline engine was removed, and a smaller electric motor was used to create space for Campbell's hand inside the housing. All the teeth were dulled, and there was like a concealed tubing to create sort of the smoke, like the gas engine smoke. So I thought that was cool too.
Cool.
All right. Another interesting thing about this movie, they used Joseph LaDuca, to do the music as he had done in the first film. And, you know, his assignment changed a bit because the sequel is tonally different than the first movie. And my perception, I don't know if you felt like I remember, I haven't watched the first one since we covered it, but I felt like it was kind of like old school horror music, like really kind of like old timey in a way that I really liked. And I thought the music was really well composed in this movie too, but it felt a lot more contemporary. You know, he had a bigger budget, so he could have a fuller score with greater orchestration. And one thing that I thought was pretty cool, though, is that the score often plays the threat sincerely, even when the images are absurd or comic. So he was really playing to the horror of the scene, because like one theory is that if the score constantly announced the jokes, that the horror would collapse completely. So LaDuca treats the film with genuine seriousness that contrasts and strengthens the comedy. But maybe that's part of why I have a harder time separating from the horror of it, because, you know, music plays such an important role in films. Like maybe I'm really tied to the horror of the film through the horror imagery and the score.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sound design was also huge for this film. David John West served as the supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer, but it was a really pretty big sound effects and post-production team. But I mean, some great examples of where this was important is the unseen force. You got to use some roaring wind sounds, accelerating whooshes, rumbles, sudden impacts, abrupt volume shifts. So the camera work and the sound together provide the body speed and aggression of something that's really absolutely invincible. Then with the possessed hand, you got the scraping, the punching, the scuttling noises, the tool noises, the impacts, movement across surfaces. which really contributes to Campbell's performance, as you were mentioning, to really make his hand second performer rather than, just Campbell goofing around there. Then you've got all the sounds within the cabin, the creaks, the groans, the laughs, the shakes, the eruptions, the crashes. And then at the end, you've got the whole monster and portal thing. And, everybody was working like 100% on this. And that's what I really appreciate about this movie. Like, that is not lost in the mess. And I think that, Ebert was correct in his assessment that this is not, I forget exactly how he said it, but it's not like a trash movie. It's a movie about trash movies, kind of, in a way. He said it differently.
Yes, he did, but I can't remember either. So, no, that's a good call.
Anyway, that's all I got.
Cool.
I think our check on the vibes on this one is complete.
Awesome.
Shall we roll into story time?
Let's do it. Okie dokie.
What?
So,
tell me about the characters, Miss Rachel.
There's not a ton, but that's okay because the ones that are there are pretty important. We've got Ash Williams, begins for the first 5 minutes as your typical horror protagonist, but then ends it as something closer to more of like an action hero, kind of. He transforms from just like a nice romantic guy playing the piano, by the way. Like, I didn't know Ash could play the piano like that. And I also don't know if Bruce Campbell was actually playing the piano. It looked like he was, but I would have to check more closely. But I just wrote that down and thought that was funny. I didn't remember that. And then the necklace, which I love that necklace from the first movie. So I thought that was, and it was a great way to like encapsulate everything that Ash does in the first movie. He is a shallower character. In the first movie, he's got a sister, which I think adds a lot to him as a person. And in this one, really the only character development we get is in those first 7 minutes with his girlfriend. And then it's like external character development as his body changes and he's possessed and then cuts his own hand off. Let's see. He has some of the most iconic lines in the movie that are still quoted. Back in 1999, when I first installed Napster onto a computer. I know, go ahead and click your tongue at me, but it was 1999 and all I had was 2 gigs of hard drive space. And some of the first things I downloaded were some clips from this movie just so I would have them. I don't know what I was going to do with them, but some of his lines from this movie were iconic and still are. So Ask
me what I downloaded.
What did you download?
On the advice of counsel, I would exercise my Fifth Amendment right.
Of course you fucking would.
Mostly songs that had to have been low quality because I can't imagine I had that much space either.
Yeah, I had very little hard drive space. It was the 90s. It was a different time. And yeah, I mean, Ash, what can you say about Ash? This movie is mostly Ash. I know that there's lots of other people, but it really is. And it is, again, what cemented Ash as a character in the collective consciousness. So, big fan. Again, named my first cat after him. Definitely a big Ash fan and a huge Bruce Campbell fan, I think, even more than the character. Just him and all the characters that he's played. We've got Linda, who's only here for like 6 minutes. But what did I write down? Plot device to make up for all the right stuff we already discussed. That's all Linda is. I mean, it is interesting watching them. If you watch them as one continuous movie, I think you have a much better sense of who Ash is. And there's a lot of people online who talk about they haven't seen the first one and have only seen the second one. And I think you miss out on knowing who Ash is if you don't have the history of the first. I think they do all work as a trilogy in a row, but I think that part of what I like about Ash has a lot to do with who we see him as in the first movie and not so much in this movie. So, but he's super fucking cool. We've got Annie Noby. She is an archaeologist following her father's research. She comes around and eventually becomes the stand-in for his girlfriend, basically. Like, she's with him because her boyfriend gets killed. And then the not hippie people, the hillbilly people, that's what I was going for.
Oh.
She kicks some ass, though. She does come around eventually. And in the very final act, she recites that banishing incantation before she is killed by Ash's possessed hand. So like her last breath, she banishes it. And then, of course, sends Ash down the big woo, Typical messing around with stuff better left alone, academic, hubris kind of thing. Just like her father, Professor Raymond Noby, who has unleashed the evil with all of his translation work. Also, Henrietta, the wife, standing by her husband. So this is before she's a Deadite. The picture of Noby like reading the words into the recorder while Henrietta just knits in a rocking chair. And it's like, what was that like for her to be like, here we go. We're just going to go to this cabin while he's over here. And she's just knitting away, and then becomes possessed, of course. Jake and Bobby Joe, pretty stereotypical. The teeth that Bill Hicks wears, or Dan Hicks, sorry. Dan Hicks is Bill in Intruder there. But they exist mostly to kind of move the plot along. Jake is an idiot, right? And he like gets rid of the pages. He throws the pages that they need down into the basement. He clearly doesn't understand what's going on here, so he takes control and then fucks everything up. And Bobby Joe pulls a Barbara and runs off into the woods, where she is then entangled by tree vines and then disappears.
No, she's dragged through the woods.
She's dragged and then like brought back to the house, right?
No, she runs into a tree.
Into the tree, and then the tree shows up at the house.
Yeah.
It's all so chaotic is the problem. And I know you have all of that for Murder Mayhem, so like you keep track of that stuff. But for like as far as the character goes, yeah, they're really just, none of the characters in this movie are super deep. And maybe that's part of what doesn't appeal to me. Maybe that's part of what doesn't appeal to me now in my middle age, is that I don't care about these characters as much as I care about the characters in The Evil Dead. And so this movie just doesn't feel as important to me because there's no connection to the characters. And I will even compare this to another movie that is in this kind of splatstick subgenre, splatter and slapstick combined. Got it? So Dead Alive is one of my favorite movies, one of my top 3 movies of all time. A lot of nostalgia involved there, but also has a lot of this, a lot of chaos, a lot of excessive gore. But I care so much about the characters in that movie. And it's like that is a perfect balance of comedy and horror. And I've seen people say this movie is the perfect balance. I disagree with that because I think the characters are too shallow and I don't care about them. I think Ash is cool as shit, but like, that's kind of it. Like, I don't care about anybody else. And I care more about the characters in the first one. And that's what makes for a good horror movie and they don't have to be super in depth, but you just have to like care about them. And I just don't about any of these guys, really. So that was a pessimistic review of our characters.
I mean, I think it's fair.
Yeah, but I think it helps. I think when we watched this, and we were both disappointed when we watched it, and we've been saying for the past couple days, like, we're going to figure this out as we talk our way through it. And so I think this is part of figuring out why this movie is not as highly ranked as the first for us, is that it lacks the pieces that make horror our favorite genre and just leans too heavy into the slapstick, which was awesome when I was 20 and really shallow myself. But yeah, bring us into Murder Mayhem and any myths that you have. I don't know if there's any myths about this movie.
Yes, and I'm actually going to continue kind of where you left off, but let's move into Murder Mayhem.
Yes.
You do it.
Murder Mayhem.
Cute. No, I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying. It's funny because Murder Mayhem's like not its own section, but we have a way that we say it.
Right.
There's no like theme song for it or anything, but I looked at Rachel at one point when we were watching this movie the other night, and I said to her, this whole movie is mayhem.
Yes.
And it really is. And it would almost be easier. I'm not going to do that, but it would be almost easier to just cover the stable parts of this. And I think that those are really, they're the parts that stand out to me more, and some of my more favorite parts, which goes really well with what you were just saying, because they are the few and in far and few between spots where there is a bit of character development. The first one I'm thinking about is when Annie comes to the bridge, Annie and her boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
I like forget that she even had a boyfriend.
I know, he did nothing except was that big scary face when he gets possessed.
When they get to the bridge and it's destroyed and they meet Jake and Bobby Joe, like that scene is, I kind of like that scene.
Yes, agreed.
That's like one of the places where the movie slows down for a second.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, again, is when those characters finally show up at the cabin right before chaos ensues again. I mean, they're kind of introduced with chaos, but in a way that is nice. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. That makes a lot of sense. But yeah, the rest of it is just nonstop fucking go, 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 go.
And then the prepping scene I also really like, which is also kind of chaotic, but it like is meant... That's what those scenes are always, is a montage. You get a lot of quick cuts. So I'm going to bang through this as quickly as I can. If you didn't watch this movie, but you're listening to this episode, I swear to God, these are the things that happen in this movie. Because it's going to sound like I'm just talking craziness here. Linda becomes a deadite, and she's beheaded by Ash in the first 7 minutes. Then we see Ash deadite briefly at the beginning of the sequel section, which at first I was like, wait, he's a deadite? I was confused about that at first a little bit. Not saying that I've sorted it all out, but I don't care as much to sort it out at this point anyway. Then Linda, who Ash has buried out in the field out there, comes back, does her dance, tells Ash to dance with her. Her disembodied head latches onto his hand, and Linda's headless corpse comes at Ash with a chainsaw. So far, so good. Linda gets Ash isn't too happy about this, eventually gets Linda's hand trapped in a vise in the tool shed. She's all locked up. He chops into her head with the chainsaw. And that death is shown like with a silhouette and blood splatter. I really liked that. Like the sort of the transfer into a little bit more subtlety, I guess.
Yep.
Amongst all the craziness, Ash's infected hand turns on him, attacks his face, hits him with a few too many plates. He gets punched in the gut and gets knocked out. While he's knocked out, like I was talking about in cinematography, the hand starts to go for the cleaver across the way. Ash stops it by stabbing his hand with the knife and removes his hand from his body with a chainsaw. And then shortly thereafter, his hand that's still acting independently from him, Ash shoots at the disembodied hand through the wall, which upon success of hitting the hand, we think at least, even though the hand comes back later, right? There's a huge blood spurt, gigantic blood spurt, which Rachel described earlier, how they accomplished that. And that was red blood, right?
I think so. Or was it black? I thought black blood came out of the wall.
I think it started red and turned black.
I think you're right. Because he was then all covered in black shit, like when they came to later.
Then they come later. Good transition. Thank you. Nailed it. Just like I was doing charades.
Thank you.
Ash gets tackled and knocked out by the group because when they show up, he basically tries to kill, well, for a good reason. He thinks something's coming in to get him. But they tackle him, knock him out, and they toss him in the cellar and then they figure out that Henrietta is down there, who's Annie's mother. And Henrietta's dead-eyed ass corpse rises from this dirt cellar floor and pursues Ash, saying, "I'll swallow your soul."
Like 5 times.
Yep. And then she says it again later, or somebody does. And so the other people are like, oh, we should probably help this guy out. Like, he wasn't like killing us that bad. So they drag him out of the cellar just in time. And Ash and, is it Ed who's helping him, or is it Jake?
I think it's Ed.
Ash and Ed are stomping on the cellar hatch over and over again, trying to get Henrietta back down there. In the process, they squish her head. Her eye pops out and flies into Annie's mouth or Bobby Joe's mouth.
I think it's Bobby Joe's mouth, because isn't
Yeah.
that what makes her run into the woods?
Probably.
Yeah, I think she like freaks out and she's like, "Wah!"
And then Ed turns next.
I think so. I feel like he got bit in the ankle or something when they were smashing on
Yeah,
the...
it wasn't even
Yeah.
clear to me how he got turned so quickly. And he's the one he says dead by dawn.
Right.
Ash comes after him and axes him all up. And that's where we see green blood all over the place. Kind of like the puke from The Exorcist.
Yep.
At some point, it's just like Annie and... I might have had this out of order.
I think doesn't Bobby Joe run out into the woods?
Yeah.
And Jake like runs out after her briefly.
Yeah,
and
he
then
doesn't catch up with her.
He doesn't catch her, but then Ash and Annie are like figuring out, oh, we need to read these, like finds the note from her father. And it's like, you
Well,
need
it's
to
not
read
just
these
a
new
note
papers. Oh, it's
either,
the
like his
audio recording? Oh, his
apparition.
ghost. That's right.
Apparition.
There's so much chaos in this movie.
Yeah. So he comes, like, all of these things are going on. Annie's father basically tells them that the pages that she's found have the 2 incantations on them. The first one, brings the demon into physical form?
Yes.
Like it kind of already is. So
but like really brings it into physical form.
really brings it in.
Right.
And then the second one will create basically a rift or a portal in the space-time continuum, Marty.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got thrown off there. That basically you can force the demon or the evil spirit through this portal to get it out of your world.
Yes. So we have a solution to our problem.
We have a solution to our problem. Meanwhile, Bobby Joe is getting tied up in the woods by the vines. And then she gets hauled through the woods. I really like that part too, where she's getting pulled through the woods, because it's kind of an extended shot. I kind of wondered how they did that. I was hoping
They have that, like, I think they used their crazy camera rigs for that.
to pull her. I was wondering how they so continuously pulled her and then were able to track that as long as they did, because they showed her being pulled for quite a while before they showed her getting hit into the tree.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. This is not a sexual assault, but there is a little bit of that as it kind of like goes under her clothes and around her, into her mouth.
Yeah, I guess it's just more implied because it happened in the first one.
I think so. And Raimi has said he regrets doing that in the first one, that it was like he wasn't thinking about how extreme that kind of is. And so I think I was sensitive to it just because in the first one, like that's uncomfortable, but the first one's more serious than this one. This is goofier.
I think if you didn't know that happened in the first one, you might not think that it was
Fair.
So assaulty. I mean, It's an assault. It's a physical assault.
Yes. But it's not like in the first one, it's very clearly a sexual assault as well.
So she gets pulled. It looks like she gets smashed into a tree somewhere in here. Yeah. So Jake had come out to look for her, and then Ash becomes a deadite again.
Yeah, out of nowhere. I still have never figured out like why he does that.
And he throws Jake into a tree.
Yep.
It says, join us.
Mm-hmm.
And then Annie's hiding in the cabin from deadite Ash, which I shortened to Dash.
Nice. Has Jake already thrown the papers into the basement at this point?
I don't care.
Okay. At some point he throws them in the basement though. That's important for later.
Yeah, because then
they have to go down to the basement.
Well, Ash does anyway.
Ash goes, yeah.
But not, well, I imagine that he threw them down there at this point.
Yes.
But Ash right now is outside. He's become deadite. Ash throws Jake into the tree.
Right. And they're outside because Jake has forced them outside.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, because Jake had a gun and was like, we're going to find... I didn't include every beat.
No, for sure. I was just trying to put it together in my head.
Yeah, he was basically like, we need to go out and find Bobby Joe.
Yep.
But once deadite Ash shows up and hurts Jake, then Annie runs into the cabin to hide from deadite Ash. At one point, like, she sees that the doorknob's turning, which is pretty good. And somebody comes through the door. Annie stabs the person immediately, but it's not deadite Ash. It's Jake.
Yep.
Whoops.
But we don't feel that bad about it because we don't really like Jake.
But we don't really know Jake.
We don't know Jake. Maybe we do like Jake.
And he's pulled into the cellar by Henrietta, right?
Right.
Somehow. And that's when just the absolute blood stuff goes everywhere. Kind of like a loosey-goosey, like a watered down blood
Yep.
everywhere. Then Ash goes looking for the pages in the cellar, finds Henrietta there. They start fighting each other. Something happens to Ash. Then Henrietta gets out of the cellar. Somewhere, I think when he was downstairs, she recites the first incantation. Annie does.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And she hasn't done the second one yet. Ash finally comes to or whatever, gets upstairs. He's fighting Henrietta and eventually cuts her apart and blows her head to pieces, right, with a shotgun. But because Annie at this point has already done the first incantation to bring the demon into the physical realm, the trees begin to attack the cabin from all sides, and this giant monster head thing appears in the doorway.
Exactly.
And so somewhere there, Annie's like, I got to do the second part. While she's trying to recite the second incantation, Ash's disembodied hand stabs her in the back. And at the same time, sort of, the monster head has like tree arms that have come in and they grab Ash. While that's happening, the portal's opening up outside. We start to see Ash stabs the monster thing in the eye. And so the tree starts getting sucked in away. I think it more just retreats because we don't see the monsters show up in 1300 AD. We just see Ash in the car.
Right.
But the portal was meant to take out the physical demon thing, but it doesn't really do that somehow, even though it goes away. I'm not sure.
Well, there's a lot of Deadites in Army of Darkness, so maybe it just got spit out somewhere else.
And then Annie's dying or died at some point from all of the things.
Yep.
Ash gets sucked into the portal, lands with his car in 1300 AD, and before the film ends, he impresses the medieval soldiers surrounding him by blowing the head off of the flying demon thing. And everybody says, "Hail!" It's kind of like the end of Rosemary's Baby. They all go, "Hail!" And then the credits roll. So yeah, follow that.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I mean, I think murder mayhem is the theme of the movie.
Yeah.
Done. But really, it's not much more than that.
Well, before you get into that, a couple of the myths. It remakes the entire first movie. We've covered that. The other characters were retconned out of existence, not necessarily. Well, not at all, actually. We just know they were basically omitted for economy purposes. And then if you want to go with Raimi's post-factum...
Right. They still existed in Raimi's reading. It's just that Ash has, squished them all together in his head. Yeah.
And then the movie is mostly improvised. Some people say that's not true. Obviously, we know there was a lot of development over the screenplay and the effects engineering, the constructed sets, the mechanical rigs, the choreographed physical comedy. I mean, there were certain little sequences, right, that I think that they were going for a certain kind of gag or whatever, and in that sense, it might have been little segments might have been improvised, but this was a very well thought out, planned film.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And I'm surprised it's taken me 25 years to figure out how this movie connects to the first one. I feel pretty confident on it now, but for years I'm like, is it kind of a remake? Is it kind of... So that's out there, and I think that's one of the top questions that's asked is how does this work?
It's a sequel.
It's a sequel, for sure. Are we ready for themes?
I'm so ready for themes.
Great. So splatstick as its own subgenre. So Campbell has said he and Raimi coined the term, but I couldn't find the citation, but it's quoted as fact in a lot of places. So I don't know which interview he said this in. I found a link and it was dead. So, it's funny, but it makes it sense. So describing splatter horror crossed with slapstick comedy. Obviously, we've talked about the Three Stooges. Three Stooges influence on a lot of the gags in the movie specifically. And there are specific gags that are lifted almost beat for beat from the Three Stooges, which I never watched a lot of that, so I didn't pick that up.
Well, it goes back to that the way that they communicated about some of the humor they were trying to do.
Right, that's just their thing. But other movies that are kind of in this subgenre include Reanimator, which was before this, but I think Reanimator has some of this as well. Dead Alive, as I've mentioned a few times, one of my favorite movies of all time, in my top 3. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, for sure, out in 2010. And I actually found an IMDb list called Splatstick that someone put together about 10 years ago that's got 50 films that are on this, that are kind of in this subgenre. So if you like this, check out the show notes. That's in there. It is, and it's interesting because I really love this subgenre. I really enjoy comedy, like horror comedy. I did a whole episode about it on my friend's podcast on The Horror and Her. We talked about Dead Alive and about why I love horror comedy. And so I think I'm glad I watched this movie back when I was younger, and I think it influenced my love of this subgenre, even if I don't enjoy this movie particularly as much as I used to. Other themes, again, a lot of the themes have to do with this movie's role in horror. So sequel or remake, right? And you said we might talk about this in our Encore episode, right? Like sequels and remakes and requels and reboots and how all of those differ from one another.
It's going to be like Scream 2022 up in here.
And critics and fans still disagree. Even though we've come down firmly on the fact that we believe this is a sequel, I guarantee you there's folks out there who disagree with us. So maybe we'll make a video about it and talk with people. So
yeah, let's hear what they have to say.
Let's see what I'm so I would love to be convinced. I always am looking to have my mind changed. So if you've got an idea, leave it in the comments, send us a message or whatever.
Can I chime in for a second?
No.
Because I have something here that might apply. I had a list of some of the horror comedies that kind of preceded this.
Oh, yeah.
By not very far. I don't need to go through all of that, but just in the 80s alone, there were a few good ones in the 70s, including Houseu, which I want to mention just because I love that movie.
Yes.
But in 81, you had American Werewolf in London. 84, you had Gremlins. 84, you had Ghostbusters. Then you had Reanimator in 1985. Same year, you had Return of the Living Dead. Do you remember that one?
I do, and I wrote that in my viewing notes. I was like, when did Return of the Living Dead come out? Because it reminded me a lot of that.
And then the other House, the American movie House that we just recently watched,
yes.
that was 85. And then we also saw, maybe last year, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 in 1986, which really shifted tone far more towards comedy.
And I really like Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. Again, I really like this subgenre.
What I did see that this movie, Evil Dead 2, added sort of to the horror comedy, that I kind of like this delineation, sort of this distinguishing factor, is that a lot of these horror comedies we just mentioned alternate frightening scene and funny scene, or frightening moment and funny moment. But Evil Dead 2 often makes the same image, the same moment perform both functions. And I like that idea, but maybe I just don't like the result. I don't know. Or don't love the result.
I just don't think there's anything very scary about this movie.
I have a hard time telling because I know.
Yeah, I know. It's not, there's not as much, the humor is so over the top that I don't find it scary. I don't find Dead Alive scary either. And so, but I think that's a really interesting point. And I think the next time I watch one of these movies, I'm going to be thinking about it differently now. So yeah, no, great points. We do have some typical horror themes, which is what makes it a horror movie. We've got academic hubris, or kind of the pursuit of knowledge to the detriment of the pursuer. You know, being an archaeologist, I mean, The Mummy and Frankenstein, mad scientist vibes, right? Pretty conventional, like ancient evil. So probably closest to The Mummy, which is a really great old Universal film that I actually enjoyed quite a bit. But we've got plenty of those tropes in horror for sure. And I think the film does acknowledge that it is Nobi's pursuit of knowledge that leads to evil being released. We've got Ash as a final guy, which is really interesting at the time because Carol Clover wrote her book which included the term final girl for the first time. And instead we've got Ash, who is like an action superhero kind of guy, kind of playing around with the horror protagonist. He absorbs all the punishment. He has that montage scene and he becomes increasingly kind of cartoonish. It's through his resourcefulness and not his like quick decision making. Like it's all just kind of goofier and bigger and larger, right? It's not like Laurie sending the kids out of the house to distract the killer. It's not like using his smarts to win. Like it's just like sheer pluck and determination that gets him through, which is a different kind of horror protagonist and final guy than we have in a lot of our slashers. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've got that old horror trope of the cabin in the woods, a domestic safe space that is under siege that we see in a gajillion movies. I'm sure this is not one of the first ones. I mean, just any kind of like isolated place where people are stuck thing. We're set up very early that the bridge is broken and he can't get away. And so here we are stuck in the woods with a crazy creature. So that's a big, very typical horror theme. And haunted house to a certain extent, because all the objects in the house become possessed by deadites. And so that's another one that we kind of, see pretty frequently. But that's it. This is not the deepest movie we've covered. This is not like, I think it's important and it's fun, but I don't think that it's got all sorts of like layers. I think the first one, for example, dealt with fear and horror in a much more visceral way. This is much more about the experience.
And I guess it was Scott Spiegel that did the sort of inspired the laughing scene too. He basically there was like a gooseneck lamp and he was making it talk or something or making that laugh. And that's what led to that.
Oh, that's funny.
Maybe we just took this movie too seriously, but I went into it purposely not trying to take it seriously.
I know. Maybe it's just that we like being serious about our movies now, or more serious. I mean, but
then
we liked Intruder.
Well, and we just watched Over Your Dead Body, which was not quite as good remake of the movie. What country?
I believe it's Norwegian.
Called The Trip, or the U.S. release version is called The Trip. You should check that out.
Yeah, we really like the original.
It's not exactly horror, but I mean, the comedy in that worked for me better. I mean, it was obviously going for a very different type of comedy. I'm not really comparing these movies. I don't want people to come after me over this statement. But I was really ready to laugh during Evil Dead 2. I didn't very often.
I think we're just less whimsical and older. I think that might be part of it. I will watch this with our teenager, so you don't have to watch it again. I'm curious what she will think. She watched it. I have watched Dead Alive with her, and she was like unimpressed by the gore. And so it'll be interesting to see if she thinks it's funny, because kids think stupid stuff's funny, but we were kids once. And
maybe this would be more fun with like a big group of people or something. It's quick. It's nonstop. You and I are just sitting on the couch. Maybe we're just too boring.
I mean, we watched lots of different kinds of movies together, and we giggled a few times, like chortled. There wasn't even like...
I feel like I forced a couple of those.
Did you?
To like demonstrate that I understood that was supposed to be funny.
Maybe we're just too jaded. Who's your favorite character?
I mean, obviously Ash is the easy answer. I'm also going to say Henrietta.
Yeah. Oh, nice. I mean, Ash, duh. Like that's, yeah, I'm still Ash. I had a cat named Ash. My Counter-Strike handle back in 2003 was Boomstick Chick, which is really from the third movie, but still big Ash fan over here. Still am. I just don't think I like this movie as much as I thought I did. And that's always disappointing to discover something about yourself.
You should have named your animals different things.
No, I'm still a fan of Ash as a character. I still think he fucking rules. I just don't think that I like this movie as much as I thought I liked this movie. But do you have a favorite quote?
I don't.
Okay.
So because I said it was, I specifically made a note to myself on this because it was really more of the context of the lines. There's obviously, like you said before, there's a lot of famous lines from this movie, but none of them are like particularly profound, or there's no like long funny line or anything like that. They're all like soundbite.
Groovy.
In Dead by Dawn, dance with me, I'll swallow your soul, join us. So it's really the context of those lines.
And for me, the one I wrote down and starred, because I didn't want to pick one of the usual ones, but was Let's Get the Fuck Out of Here, which Bobby Joe says, which the song that I wrote inspired by The Evil Dead is called Let's Fucking Leave, if you want to go back and listen to that and haven't heard that song yet. And so I think I liked the fact that she just said it and nobody listened, because although actually they want to leave in this movie, they just can't. But that was it. So speaking of open mic, we did write some songs.
That's right. Our gimmick this week was character study, which means we pick one of the characters and write a song about them from their perspective. There's a lot of ways we can interpret it. I'll be interested to... Whoa. I will be interested to see how you interpreted it.
You and those RTs, man.
RTEDs, no good.
No bueno.
Phone home. All right, we need to determine who's going to go first.
Okie dokie. Flip the pick.
Nope, I'm going to roll a drumstick your direction.
Come on.
And if you can see the writing, it means it's your pick. And if you can't see the writing, it means it's my pick.
Okay. I have to put my glasses on.
Well, can you see that there's...
No, I can't. I can't see that far.
I'm not telling you to read the writing, just whether you can see that there's writing.
I cannot see if there's writing or not. It just looks like wooden blob that might have writing, but that also might just be the edge of the carpet.
I'm going to take it as my pick because...
I can see the writing. I can see the writing.
All right, then you pick.
I'll go first.
All right, Rachel's going to go first. Let's get you set up, and we'll join you back here in a bit.
Ladies and gents, we proudly present
For your listening delights, this week's Open Mic.
All right, well, I think this is a first. We have just realized that we wrote a song about the same character. That's pretty cool. And of course, I thought I was being clever. You probably thought you were being clever.
I'm always clever.
No, always clever. Sure. Anyway, we both chose Henrietta to write about, which I think makes sense because we've already written a song in the Evil Dead universe when we covered the Evil Dead. And so Henrietta is a different character. I have no idea how you have come towards this, but I was struck by Henrietta rocking and knitting in the chair and kind of thinking about what it would be like if you had a husband who was obsessed with something that then caused your demise and your doom. I don't know what that's like. So, I don't know. Henrietta just called to me. And yeah, I also, differently, as you can see, John, but listener, you cannot, is that I am on the guitar this week. I don't know, just kind of called to me a little bit. My guitar playing is subpar. Maybe not. Maybe it's like par, like below average. Below average for me. Anyway, it'll be fine. You'll get the gist. This is Henrietta.
By your side for this life, I signed up to be your wife. Where you go, I'll go too. Never knew we'd go beyond. And now I'm here in this dark hole, a demon's pawn. I lost my soul because death won't part us. Death won't part us. Death won't part us. No, death can't part us. Death can't part us. Death can't part us. Oh. We had plans, we're going to be such a happy family. But your obsession with these words has cost us more than we can afford. And now I'm here, trapped in this hole, a demon's pawn. I lost my soul
was like, a different kind of thing from usual. Oh, you want a mic, I guess. Here. My fingers also hurt, so I kind of could keep going. Riffing on the... My fingers have no calluses. I used to have calluses.
That was cool.
I really liked the first verse, which is what came first. And then I liked the kind of... And I did call it Henrietta. I probably could have called it like death won't part us. Because like that idea, right? Till death do us part. Except poor Henrietta got stuck even beyond death with this guy who was just obsessed. And now she's, a big Ted Raimi in a suit. And who wants that?
Is that what? That's why I hope I die first, because I don't want you to become Ted Raimi in a suit.
I mean, who wants that? Nobody knows. If we decide to work on this one more, I'm super open to adding a bridge. Like, I had more fun kind of with the imagined instruments in my head, but I'm not as good at that as you are. So if we did decide to work more on this one, I would be interested in what else we could do, because I think that, like, the chorus could be really cool when you do your thing that you do with choruses. But yeah, it was a fun little ditty.
Very nice.
Let's hear your Henrietta.
All right. We don't have as much setting up to do with you on the guitar.
True story.
But we're going to have to get you out of your trap.
I am trapped in this dark hole. All right, cool. BRB.
All right. Well, I too did a song about Henrietta, also called Henrietta. I will also be playing it on guitar, and it might be in a similar key as your song.
Do your own thing.
Never. And since Henrietta is the hottest chick in this movie, that's why I did this. Let's see. This one, it's a little rougher than sometimes I feel like, but... This is the last thing you ever needed, and just think, you used to be happy. Your man had a plan, but did not understand the hell all his actions would bring. Henrietta, I'm not so sure what's gonna end up said, yeah. I must admit you used to look better, but times have changed, we're all showing our age. Henrietta, us a scare there under the earth. You were downstairs the whole time, just waiting, depressed and possessed. And I must confess, this is more than I can bear. Henrietta, I'm not so sure what's gonna end up said, yeah. I must admit you used to look better, times have changed, we're all showing our age. Henrietta, I'm sorry that it came to this. You deserved more happiness. You fell face first into a curse. Now you're simply the worst. Henrietta, I'm not so sure what's gonna end up sad. I must admit you used to look better, but times have changed, we're all showing our age. Henrietta, now I've gotta get ya. I'm so sorry I met ya. There's no way I can let ya. Henrietta.
That was so pretty.
Thank you.
I love your little, I don't know if they're suspended notes or I'd have to see the chords, but like your melodies are so interesting. And your guitar playing so good.
Thank you, love.
That was really cool. Well, who knew that Henrietta was our favorite character?
She's the best.
She is just
If you keep her down where she belongs.
But see, I was more like pre-transformation Henrietta intrigues me as like the archaeologist's wife, you know? But interesting how we ended up in the same spot. Should we get back to our spots and finish up?
Yeah, I think we're losing light.
Let's do it.
All right, we are losing light. Time to wrap these shenanigans up. I was worried. I got thinking that even though we have done like basically 2 encore episodes, like an encore and a special episode since the Jaws episodes, that I never like filled the space on the Wheel of Horror. But then I was just looking and it's just a sequel spot that we spun. So I've got nothing to fill in.
Oh, right. And there's no new sequels. You've put Jaws 2 on the list.
I'll check if we get there.
Oh, and you should put Army of Darkness on the list.
I think it'll just be the Evil Dead spot.
I got you. Okay, that makes sense.
We don't need to worry about the sequel unless we spin it.
Okay, cool.
So, the Wheel of Horror, of course, is the randomizer wheel on my phone. It's an app. They're not sponsoring us, so I'm not going to tell you which one yet. You know who you are. No, I don't know. And it's got 13 movies on it. It's got a couple of sequel spots, which if we land on those, I've got a sequel, which is the Wheel of Sequels. And so the movies that we could spin other than the potential sequel wheel is 30 Days of Night, Alien, The Strangers, A Nightmare on Elm Street, It Follows, Child's Play, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Weapons, Terrifier, Sleepaway Camp, Pieces, Audition, Carrie. Carrie's the last one, but there's a sequel after that, so I said it like it was there was something else. Let me randomize these even more. And then, let's see what we're going to watch next. Whoa. You know what? I hate that spin.
Why?
Because I'm tired of it. It needs to be a longer spin time for the movie.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I've done it. I've fixed it. I've complained about it. It hadn't finished spinning, so it's not like I picked something different.
What's it going to be?
Child's Play.
Yay! Oh my goodness, I'm so excited.
All right.
Oh, that's great. That was what year was that? It's like mid 80s. Yeah, mid to late 80s. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. This is great.
And then we've got the gimmick wheel so we can know what the limits or boundaries or the inspiration behind the songwriting is going to be, yeah?
Yes.
All right, let me spin that. Obviously, this week was character study, but we've got a few. I might have added a couple of new things. I don't know if we'll actually spin them. All right.
What is?
Let me make sure I understand.
What you wrote?
Yes, is this? Well, it's called You Can Duet.
Okay.
And so we need to write a song that when we do the demo, it's intended to be a duet.
Oh, cool. All right.
We've each kind of done that on one of our songs in the past.
We have, but without that being the gimmick. Oh, I like that a lot.
So, and this is for Child's Play, which has some interesting ways that maybe this could be interpreted.
Oh, I'm so psyched. I love this movie. Really excited.
Our next deep dive then is going to be on Child's Play, but that's not going to be next week, nor is it going to be the week after.
That's right.
Next week will be our encore, quote unquote, episode for Evil Dead 2. I think previously for Jaws, we had already kind of planned on the shark episode, so we didn't get to really do kind of an episode about sequels, which I would like to do.
Okay, cool.
We'll figure out exactly what that means, but maybe we'll...
I like that idea, though. Talking about sequels, requels, reboots, that kind of thing.
And we can, do some recommendations on some of what we think are some of the better sequels in different series or franchises or whatever. And then the week after that, we're going to do our back to school special.
Yes, because, oh my goodness, it's back to school time.
So we're going to maybe focus on some horror movies that either the characters are in school or the horror takes place in a school. I think there's a wide variety in there we can pick from. So I think that'll be a lot of fun, a great way to kind of transition us towards the fall. And then after that, I think we're going to go back to the every other week deep dive encore thing, at least until sort of around New Year's time. Yeah?
Right. I think that's the plan for sure. But depends what we spin. I mean, I feel if we hit Alien in there at some point, that could be a two-parter, right? We might have a two-parter or two in there, depending on what we spin.
That's fair. And I think there's also a chance that when we get a little closer to Halloween, we might pick a movie or two specifically.
Yeah, we did that last year.
Go off wheel for a moment. So.
Yep. But hey, if you have any suggestions or ideas or comments or questions, hit us up on social media. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube are where we're the most active. That's OMNLD Pod. We also are on X and Blue Sky, a little less active, but we're there. You could email us, omnldpod@gmail.com. And please pass this on to one of your friends who enjoys horror as much as you do, because if you're here, you clearly are into this. So come hang out with us. Thank you for hanging out with us and bring some more folks into the circle.
Yep, next week we'll be talking about horror sequels, so join us for that. And until then, keep watching those horror movies.
See ya.
Bye.